Welcome to the Get a Grip on Life podcast, Anita Wilson.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
Where are you now? What state?
I'm in Ohio. I'm in the Columbus area, a
Okay.
suburb of Columbus. Yeah.
So you write under this pen name Alias in town. Do people know that who you are? Do they know it's Anita Wilson?
Well, if you look up Anita Wilson on the internet, you're going to get page after page of a gospel singer. So I decided to take the letters of my name and rearrange them into Alias in town.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that on purpose because there are a lot of alias people living in every town who suffer from addiction and depression and suicidal thoughts. And so since that is what I went through, I decided to use Alias in town as my pen name. And that way people wouldn't get me confused with the gospel singer. Although I do sing.
Well,
but not like her.
So let me ask you, what are you writing this because it's therapeutic, or is there a desire to help people, or is it both?
It actually is both. It started out to be therapeutic. When I came home from the psychiatric hospital after trying to commit suicide, I decided that I had to try to figure out how I got to the point where I am or where I was. And so I went through a big stack of journals, about 10 years worth, and I started just poring over those journals and trying to figure out what on earth had gotten me to this low point. And I discovered through the journals that I kept taking power back to myself when I should have been releasing and surrendering things. And so I took those journal entries and I wrote some essays about the journal entries, and then I did some artwork and created this scrapbook. And then I set it on a shelf, and it was therapeutic for me. I did it for myself, and I had actually forgotten about it. I didn't even pay any attention to it until I saw this TED Talk from Brene Brown. Have you ever heard of her?
No.
Brene Brown. She is an amazing speaker and author, and she writes a lot about vulnerability, about exposing yourself and your heart. And I heard this TED Talk that she did, and she was talking about how a story is just a soul. And then she said the word courage, the root of the word courage is heart. Cur means heart. And that the original definition of the word courage was to express yourself with your whole heart. And when I heard that, I just felt like, you know what? That story needs to be out there just in case anybody can get some help from it. And so I took the scrapbook off the shelf and I transformed it into a book, and I just put it out there and wrote it. And since that time, I've taken a lot of different steps in my life to change and to recover. It's been over 7 years now since that time. And there's been a lot of little steps, and my goal was to have 100 people. Not a very big goal, but 100 people hear the story. And in January of 2019, O Magazine did an article on suicide survivors, and I was one of the people that they interviewed for that article. And so a lot more than 100 people now have heard my story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
How much can I ask you about before you made your suicide attempt? Am I allowed to ask you about that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about when you started to have negative thoughts about yourself and wanting to hurt yourself. When did that start?
Well, it started, it kind of goes back to the fact that I live with a chronic illness. And that chronic illness has to do with migraines and vertigo. And I have occasions where I'm bedridden for a couple days a week. And it got to the point in 2008 where I had to quit my job, and I had to give up my career. I had to give up all of the volunteerism that I was doing. And that just led to this spiral down of depression. And I got so depressed, and this friend that was on a internet site that I was belonged to, he suggested that I use alcohol to help with the vertigo, because alcohol is a suppressant of the nervous system. And so I did. I took a shot of liquor, and it helped. And then I took 2 shots of liquor because that soon wasn't enough. And then 2 shots weren't enough. And then pretty soon I was taking the depression and I was escaping into alcoholism. Got to the point where I was drinking about a liter of 100 proof alcohol every day. And then I was just mixing that with pain pills. I was just trying to escape. And of course, that took my depression into this state where I disassociated from reality a lot of times. And
who were you living with at the time? Were you living alone?
I was living with my family. And I was able to hide this because I just would say, oh, I'm sick today. I'm not feeling well today. And then they would just buy that excuse because the behavior was so unusual for me to be, they wouldn't have even thought mom is upstairs drinking and getting high. They would have never even thought that. So I was able to hide it from them. And then when the depression got really bad, I wasn't hiding from them anymore. Oh, probably the last 6 months before I got to the place of suicide, I was not myself. I was so difficult to get along with. I would have these horrible mood swings. I took away from my teenage children the mother that they deserved to have at the time. And I got to a point where my life was just, I felt that my life wasn't worth living. And that is what led up to this suicide attempt.
But, in a sense, that life you were living wasn't worth living. You needed to change.
I did. I really did. And that change, the suicide attempt was the impetus for that change. And I've been on an uphill stride ever since. And just taking it step by step, one day at a time, one step at a time. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to ask a few more questions about that because I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about that they want to talk about the post and how great it is. But I feel like sometimes people carry their demons with them forward, and there's sort of like there's coping mechanisms in place and this sort of thing. But sometimes, I think sometimes, it's interesting. I have a bit of a theory about depression, and I'm not a doctor. It's just my own idea. Sure. I feel like there is clinical depressions, of course. There's reasons why people can be depressed, and they can be chemical reasons, and they can have nothing to do with your life. It can be unfortunate, just like, you have diabetes or you're born with juvenile diabetes. Right. Whatever. Things can happen to you. But I think that a lot of people are depressed because their life is really bad and they're not willing to change.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And that goes back to what I was saying about the word courage and having that being able to express yourself with your whole heart. And for whatever reason, when your life gets really bad, you tend to withdraw and you tend to want to hide and not come out and not come forward with what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And when you do that, these things that take place in the dark places are all moldy and slimy and they don't grow. And your life needs to be brought into the light where it can be nourished. And so quit hiding, I guess, would be the thing that I needed to do.
I think it's shame that causes us to hide. It's like when people are deep in shame and they're deep in their own. It's like how you see someone who's very egotistical, like a narcissistic, egotistical person. There's like an opposite to that. It's like, I don't know what the right description is, but it's like a negative ego. It's like you really hate who you are and who you're being every day and how you're behaving, and you're betraying your role as a spouse or a parent or a friend or a son or a daughter or whatever it is. You're betraying that, and you do it every single day. And I think there's some people that, they get into those spots and it's the same as having good habits. Good habits will gain momentum, and then the bad habits gain momentum as well. And they have their own energy. They have their own energy and their own thrust and their own ability to manifest, and then people somewhat indulge in them too. There's like a negative indulgence that goes with it, that people take almost like a perverse kind of pleasure in. Like, oh, I'm such an awful person. I hate myself. And there's like you look at it and you think that you're indulging in that a little bit, in that self-pity or something. You know what I mean? Is that an accurate? I'm just like thinking out loud here, but is that accurate?
Yeah. I think you're onto something. It feeds on itself. It's like you've let this monster in,
Hmm.
and then the monster just keeps feeding on itself, and there's this hunger
Hmm.
of whatever you keep feeding the monster, it just keeps hungering after those same things. And so you just keep feeding the monster the same stuff, the same dysfunctional behaviors, the same dysfunctional thoughts, the same dysfunctional patterns.
Hmm.
And then that just gets more and more hungry. And so you feed it more and more. And until you can change the root, until you can change the thought patterns, until you can change the very things that you're doing to relieve stress. If you're going to turn to escape every time you're stressed out, well, that's a great feeling to have, is escape, but it certainly doesn't do you any good. It doesn't help with the stressful situation. It doesn't help with your life going forward at all. So you just end up feeding all that negative stuff, and it becoming snowballing in effect, and affects how your mind thinks. I like what you had said about how you start to think, oh, my life is so bad and I'm so horrible, and then that's where shame comes in.
Sure.
Shame is when you start to say, it's not the situation, it's me. And that is shame. And when you start
But there
to
is
do
a sense that it is you. Like there's a sense that it is you, right? Because
Yes.
let me throw this at you. Like, so let's say you're on it, you're like, because there's an idea of spiraling here. Everyone talks about this spiral, this out of control spiral that ends in a, in some disaster or rock bottom or different thing. They talk about, I hit rock bottom, I did whatever. But there's a sense that what happens when you're in that spiral is there's this cycle of betraying your own integrity that's fundamental to it. It's like,
Boy, that's a good.
It's like, oh, you wake up the next morning, you have a hangover, and you're like, oh, why did I drink that bottle of vodka last night? Oh my God, who am I sleeping? Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And then the shame kicks in, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that again. And then, but you're feeling so much shame that you want to get rid of that shame, and then you're back to the drugs or the alcohol again. And it's like you betray your own integrity, and you betray your own integrity, and you betray your own integrity, till finally, like, you don't even want to live with yourself anymore.
Yeah, and until something interrupts that spiral, I believe that people stay stuck in it. I think that's why so many people say that they hit rock bottom, because the spiral has to end somewhere. It's like it has its own energy, almost like a funnel, where you put water in a funnel and it starts to spiral down and spiral down and spiral down. It's going to keep spiraling until it runs out of whatever is being fed.
I think you run out of like credible blame.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Like you realize I am a fucking asshole. Whatever. You know what I mean? I can't believe I did that. Why would I do that or whatever? And like that's where the rock bottom is, and then there's like this realization. And it's just so painful for people to realize. It's funny because these types of situations are all similar and they manifest themselves differently. But like, let's say you were just a complete jerk for the first 20 years of your marriage, and your wife stayed with you, or reverse it around, you're a complete bitch for the first 20 years of your marriage. And all of a sudden it becomes, a mirror gets put in front of you and you actually see it. That's hard to deal with, man, to realize that you've actually been responsible for your own pain and somebody else's pain for so long. It's hard for people.
It is. It is. It's very difficult. But what you do with that realization, I think, is are you breaking the spiral? Are you going to break the spiral, or are you going to continue in it? And it's what you do with those realizations that become the stepping off points to new patterns and new behaviors. Unless you interrupt that spiral, and unless you take that recognition and you absorb it in yourself and you say, I have power. I think when you are spiraling down, you feel powerless. And when you can come to a realization that I am an asshole, but I have power.
Sure.
I have power. And that is prime It's prime.
Do you think, like, part of this to me is that when I think about how wealthy we are, I'm in Canada, like in Canada, the United States, like forget about like, oh,
Yeah.
this person is wealthier than me, which is envy, right?
Hmm.
But just
Yeah.
considering like how wealthy we are in comparison to the rest of the world and to our parents and generations before us, I think there's something with our wealth that enables this more than it did in the past.
I agree with you. For whatever reason, mental health, it affects 1 out of 5 people, which is a huge percentage. Now, if you were to ask that back in the 1940s, it certainly would not have been. Of course, they weren't diagnosing back then, but still the same attitudes that they had back in the 1940s were certainly not the attitudes that we have now.
Hmm.
And because of the ease of life, I think it sometimes makes it harder to live life. We expect a certain amount of ease, and so we become disappointed easier if we don't
Mhm.
have that amount of ease. And we expect a certain level of materialism, and if we don't have that level, we can compare ourselves, like you said, envy to
Mhm.
others, and then that makes it more difficult. And I don't really have an explanation for it, but I think that you're onto something there when it comes to the our well-being, has as far as our physical world and our wealth and our comfort has become so much greater than it was in our grandparents or our great grandparents' day, that we have somehow lost how to deal with the difficulties when life becomes difficult. If you think about the 1940s, I mean, they were coming through the Great Depression, they were coming through war, and what that they had some stuff going on, man,
Sure.
you know.
Well, you
But
hear
yet,
about these women that lost, like, you had 5 sons, all 5 of them died in the Second World War.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
what? Holy
yeah,
macaroni, you know?
and you don't, and you just the mental health crisis is what we call it now, it just didn't exist in that time period. So what's the difference? What is it?
I think there's an element of boredom to the whole thing. Like,
Mm.
the idea that idle hands are the work of the devil in a way, that
Mhm.
people can be so comfortable without, having any challenges in their life. They don't have the call to adventure is not forced upon them. They can
Mm.
live as adultolescents into their 30s with their parents, and this is normal. I mean,
Yes.
it's kind of like, college is not a place of higher learning. It's a place to get drunk and have sex. Um,
Yeah,
there's a lot
unfortunately.
of there's a purpose void that's been created that I think is feeding this in a way and making people think life is horrible when actually we probably live in the greatest time ever to be alive in the history of human beings.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We really do. I mean, especially, I mean, you look at here in Canada, even our poorest people are nowhere near the poverty level of some of the other countries in this world. A third
Oh,
world
come on.
country poor person. Oh goodness gracious, our poorest people are not that poor,
Well,
and that
poverty,
sounds cold, but it's
yeah,
true.
poverty in Canada is simply a function of single motherhood. Okay.
Oh
So,
wow,
right.
interesting.
So if you take poverty statistics and you look at, I'm not going to say any numbers because sometimes I get in trouble because my numbers are off by 5 or 10% or something like that. But if you took if you eliminated the single motherhood, or you paid them to be mothers or something like that, I don't know so I'm not proposing a social solution here. Okay. But what I'm
Right.
saying is that the only people that live in poverty in Canada, statistically, are single mothers and their children. That's it. And so you have a breakdown
Interesting.
of the family, right? So the
Yes.
only reason there's poverty in Canada is because of the breakdown of the family. Oh, well, then it's because of patriarchy, and that's all. I think
Mm,
you have a very real statistic there in front of you. And
mm.
if you're part of a visible minority, it's even worse.
Oh,
So there you go, right? Those are the statistics, right? So poverty,
yeah.
in a sense, I mean, if you went back in time, if we got a time machine, we went back to Socrates and we said to him, we're sitting on the steps of the Parthenon, and we said, "Hey, Socrates, I want to tell you about poor people where I live. The number one problem they have is that they're overweight,
Mm,
and we live in a place where it's freezing cold for half of the year, below zero, And all the poor people have these holes in the wall that push hot air into the room so that it stays at about 70 degrees for,
Yeah.
98% of the time. And all of them are clothed and they have shoes on their feet. And they, they have these little devices in their hands that not only can they speak to people around the world in real time, but also has access to all of human knowledge. Those are the poor people.
That's the poor people, exactly. And
and I'm not criticizing them. There's definitely problems we can fix, but in terms of the issue is not, maybe it's poor in spirit is probably the bigger problem that we have.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Poor in spirit is I think that defines where we are in our culture now. Is that we have a lack of wealth within the spirit of our souls. We just have this lack of wealth, and we fill it up with other things. And needing a sense of purpose is so important to a human being. We have to have a sense of purpose in order to survive, I think. And without a purpose, we just perish.
It's interesting that, I think we all are imbued as spiritual creatures with a sense of purpose. I think we destroy our sense of purpose. I don't think we don't have it. I think it's something we lose. I think it's like your soul. You can sell it. You can sell your soul to the devil in a way. Like, there's like words, you can change the words, but there's something to it that's spiritual and soul. And I'm not saying there isn't real depression out there and that people don't have chemical imbalances and that there's doctors and psychiatrists. I'm not talking about that, but I'm saying a lot of people are experiencing this purpose void and it's come up over and over again. I want to ask you about redemption though, because that's really what your story is about, right?
It is. Yes, it is.
And when I speak to people about suicide or I speak to people about this, it always what always rings in my head, and I've never said it, is the story of you said that you're a Christian. I'm also a Christian.
I am.
Yeah. So I'm always tempted to bring up the story of the prodigal son, the parable of the prodigal son, because in a sense that's your story, right?
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. I had strayed so far away from where I was as a person. I at the time, just before I had tried to commit suicide, I was an elder in my church, and I fell so far from that. And I had to turn. I had to make a choice to turn around, to take a stock of my life and make a choice to turn. Now, the people that were in my life, I wouldn't have been able to do it without that. I had such great support from my family and friends that without them, I probably would have attempted suicide again. But they were there for me. And I think that not only is there a problem with lack of purpose, but isolationism. And not allowing your community of people around you. When you do that, you are cutting off your source. I mean, not only do you have your source of life and peace and purpose from God, but the people that are around you, we are created to be in community with other people. And if we cut that off, if we continue to hide our issues and our problems and continue to lock the door behind us and not let anybody in, then we're cutting off that source as well. And without my family, I would have never gone through the intervention that they had planned for me. I never would have gone into the psychiatric care that I needed, and I never would have come back to God in a redemptive way. And the prodigal son, yes, God the Father was just waiting for me. And one of the things that happened, the reason I know this for sure, is that one of the things that happened to me when I was in the psychiatric hospital, I was so muddle-headed and so confused. My brain was just pickled with alcohol and drugs. And I couldn't hold on to any kind of coherent thought. It just was escaping my brain. I couldn't hold a conversation. I couldn't read a book. My brain was just fried. But When I was in the psychiatric hospital, I kept getting scriptures just kept flooding my brain, kept flooding my mind, and the words to old hymns would just keep flooding my mind. And those were coherent thoughts. Those were thoughts that were clear and precise and gave me direction. And I remember I didn't want to wake up my roommate, so I would go into the bathroom at night and I would sit on the floor in front of the toilet and take my journal, and I would just write down all these scriptures that was coming into my brain, because it felt so good to be able to have a clear thought for a change. And I know that God was with me because of that. It was something that to me was a miracle. It was a miracle that happened. And it was reassurance that, you know what, you have value, you have worth. You're not alone. I'm right here with you. I have given you blessings. I've set before you today life and blessings, blessings and curses, life and death. Now choose life. That was one of the scriptures that kept coming back and forth to my brain. I have set before you blessings and curses, life and death. Now choose life. And I chose life.
The Redeemer is he that is died and is reborn, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's the message of the gospel, right? So it's interesting, you know, when you think about the prodigal son and you think about that story, it's endless in its depth. It's one of my favorite parables. But you think about it, it's interesting because in our lives, we all have the opportunity. We all become the prodigal son, some of us worse than others. We all have the opportunity to be the benevolent father. And we all sometimes are the envious brother. You know, everyone forgets about the envious brother at the end. You know, you would not even give me a goat that I might celebrate with my friends, right? So it's interesting how deep that story is. And, you know, in our lives, you know, I've seen, you know, situations where, you know, I was the prodigal son and had to return with shame and just ask, you know, in a sense, we all have to come back to the Father. And then I've had times where I was the, you know, the benevolent father who was offering the forgiveness. And then there's times when you're the envious brother where you're like, why are you forgiving that person for that? Right? It's such a wonderful story. It's so deep, you know, on so many different levels in the story of redemption. So you're talking about, it's interesting because you were mentioning about how confusing it is with your head when you're into the drugs and the alcohol and you're now coming off of them. Is it the shame that's preventing you from accepting or seeing that other people are trying to help you? What is it? Is it denial of shame? Or what is it at that point when you're refusing help, when you're rejecting those that so clearly love you? What is it?
I think shame has a lot to do with it. I think not wanting to let go of what you have found to be a solution for your pain. You found this solution for your pain, and even though it's not the right solution, and even though it's damaging you, it still is a solution. It's something that I found that fixes the problem right now, and not wanting to let go of that. And coming to a point to say, this solution is not getting me anywhere. It is not an actual solution, but you have to come to a point of brokenness in order before you can recognize that just a solution of completely escaping your life, no solution at all. That's not choosing life. Choosing life isn't choosing escape. Choosing life is to do even the little things with joy and with purpose. Even the little things that you do during the day. Like you can decide, do I want to watch TV or do I want to go take a walk? Which choice is a choice that's going to give me more life? And so we make those little choices every day, and by holding on to what we think is a solution, I think is probably the reason why it's so difficult for people to let go and to make that redeeming turn, that redeeming situation better.
Do your demons still chase you?
Yes. That was a quick answer.
Hmm.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I find that I purposely put into in place in my life just different coping mechanisms and things that will help me now with stress. And I have to discipline myself to do that because there are times when I just want to drink so bad
Hmm.
because it would be so much easier for me to just numb it all down and escape it all. But so far, praise God, step by step by step, day by day by day, I've been avoiding that. And but yes, they do still chase me. And it's not just the craving for the alcohol, or the pain pills, but the other demons that keep trying to come back into my mind are the tracks that we were talking about before that play in your head. You're an idiot.
The
You're
self-talk, the bad self-talk.
Yeah, the bad self-talk that will pop up and pop up and
Hmm.
pop up, and I have to take those thoughts captive and say, "No,
Hmm.
I am not an idiot. I am not worthless."
Sure.
And I have to take those thoughts captive and say, "No, those are garbage thoughts." And I have this exercise that I do in my mind where I literally take those thoughts and envision a garbage bag, stuff them in the garbage bag,
Yeah.
take it out to the road, and leave it. Because if I can visualize myself doing that, I can get rid of that tape that just
Hmm.
plays back around and around and around and around and around, which which is probably my biggest demon, I would say.
Yeah, it's like
That is probably
it's
my
like you
biggest
have this
demon.
on, yeah, you have an ongoing conversation with, it's like, you ever see that movie or read the books, The Lord of the Rings?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so the
Yes.
character of Gollum and Schmeagol,
Mm,
and
precious.
Precious. Oh yeah, but oh no, he has this conversation going on with himself. And one of the reasons
Mhm.
why that movie resonates so well is because there's real archetypal um
Yes.
demonstrations, or what's actually going on in the world. And so a lot of people are having that Gollum Schmeagol conversation in their head over and over and
Mm,
over again. And they're we live in polarity in a way. And
mm,
I say this sometimes to people, and they don't believe me. They look at me like I'm crazy. Like, you're 50% malevolence, 50% benevolence. Like, everybody is.
true.
And you can choose
Yeah.
one or the other. You can choose it in an underhanded, sneaky way that nobody knows what you're actually up to, right? And then
Mhm.
your benevolence can also be very quiet and hidden. So we live like in this polarity and secret worlds with our own conversations in our head. And it's interesting that
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
have an image you exercise to kind of exercise that negativity out of your life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I literally take the thought captive. If I am using the word literally, right?
Sure.
It's
Well,
controversial.
you know
But
what? I mean, I think the spiritual world is as real or realer than the world that we're in right now.
yeah.
The physical world, there's something spiritual that's really alive. The whole idea of worthlessness, did that start as a child for you? Was there something that happened in your child? If you don't mind me asking, of course, is there something that happened in your childhood that where that kind of seed was put in you of negativity, negative self-image? Did something happen to you when you were younger?
Yes. Yeah, there was. There was some sexual abuse
Hmm.
from a man that I trusted and loved,
Hmm.
and as a young girl at 8 years old, and that started to, it affected who can I trust, um,
Hmm.
shame, you know,
Sure.
what
You would,
what did I do to deserve this, or what
sure.
did I do to egg this on? As a kid, you don't know,
Sure.
you know.
It's
So it
your vulnerability was stolen from you. That's what it is at a very young age.
mm, it
There's,
was.
you said about vulnerability, you mentioned that. I wrote it down actually when you said it, and I was waiting for the time to bring it back up, but there's something to that. It's not an innocence. It's difference between innocence and vulnerability.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is the willingness to be truly yourself with somebody else in a way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think a lot of women in our culture have been robbed with that at a young age by,
Yeah.
by these sexual situations that seem to really cause them, when before they're women, like before when they're young teenagers or children, that really rob them of something. And I don't know exactly what it is, but I can't put my finger on it, but I've spoken to a couple women and they've hinted at this or just come out and told me, like you did, that this happened to me. And there's something that they carry with them that they can't seem to get rid of, that they have to deal with after that. It's really sad, actually. I don't know what the solution to that problem is, but it seems like once that happens to someone as a child or something, they need to deal with it right away and they need to be told that they don't need to feel shame about that, or something has to happen. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'm right about that, but I've encountered it on this podcast, and then I'm a curious guy and have a lot of people talk to me in the past, and that always seems to be at the heart of all this with women, is some sort of incident. I haven't talked to any men about this, but some sort of incident involving their vulnerability in some man they trusted. It wasn't a stranger. It was a man that they trusted and who violated them sexually at a young age. It seems to be a serious problem for women.
Yeah. And I didn't, for myself, I didn't deal with it until I was in my 20s. And so all of that shame I carried with me throughout my entire childhood and into my early 20s. And I just didn't deal with it. And my vulnerability stolen, I think that's a very succinct way to put it. Because I didn't trust that I could be real. I could be myself around other people. And in fact, that still played out even back into my 40s when I was dealing with this depression cycle from this chronic illness that I'm living with. It was the same kind of thing. I didn't feel like I could trust the people that loved me the most, that were there for me. I kept hiding myself, because what happens if I put myself out there? Am I going to be crushed again? Am I going to be taken advantage of again? What happens if I put myself out there? Maybe it's better if I just stay hidden.
Yeah, and then even from myself, even from yourself, right, in a sense.
Yes.
There's something going on too in this world, this dark, like slimy world, like your moldy world you were talking about, of your head and this negative ego. I kind of brought up, like it's like the opposite of narcissism, but it's like a negative narcissism or something. But there's a power dynamic between the perpetrator and the person, the victim, that carries through. Like that person's like they have power over them. They won't tell on them. They won't expose the light to that, because they feel that they're made to feel like it was their fault or something, or they did something wrong. It's a really dark place. And I don't know how to shine any light on it for sure, but I see it. It's like it's a real thing it's a combination of like being afraid to say that you were hurt by somebody, your vulnerability being stolen from you, and this power of the perpetrator staying with you into adulthood and causing other trust issues down the road.
Right. For myself, I still don't tell people who this person was, because of the reputation they have in my family. And I feel like I can't ruin that reputation, even though what was done to me was despicable. There's something about that power it's still there, and I still won't reveal who that was, except to my very, very closest people that I know and love, and to my therapist.
Sure.
So, but yeah, there is this power that sways over, and forgiveness has to enter the picture. You have to forgive, and forgiveness was about me. It wasn't about him. It was about me. I had to forgive him for myself, because I couldn't move forward without forgiving him. I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to I went through another time period in my 20s, obviously, where where I experienced some depression. There was no suicide attempt or anything there, but there was when I reckoned with all of this this abuse and turmoil. I reckoned
Hmm.
with that in my 20s, and forgiveness was the only way I could find for myself to begin healing in that, and begin to reshape my life. And it's interesting because it comes back up constantly. It is something that was stolen from me that I don't think I can ever get back. It it affects everything that I do, every decision that I make, because it shaped who I was. And because it shaped who I was, it's a part of who I am. And I don't feel like I have the power to change that. And I don't know if there is any power other than God that could change that. So I do the best I can do by living day by day and taking step by step, and striving to continue to forgive,
Hmm.
and to continue to live a life where where it's of my own choosing, out of my own power.
I think that you could probably, um, add to that, and I certainly do this as well. Is try to like people can try to foster a dialogue of positive self talk
Mm.
or
Hmm. Oh,
benign
yes.
self talk that's not
Yes.
negative. And there's a habit there, like when you encounter something, and of course it's because I'm an idiot, or of course it's because I'm bald or I'm short or whatever the problem is, right? That you're perceiving, that you're putting into yourself. And maybe other
Mhm.
people put it on you too. Like it's not just you. But
True.
you can engage in that. I am worthy. You know,
I
you
am. Yes.
I think you are. I think you're
Yeah.
extremely courageous actually.
Thank you. Yeah. To finding worth and value and all of those things, um, it's all part wrapped up into your identity. Like I was saying before, I feel like there was a part of my identity that was stolen, but there's a part of my identity that's been redeemed. A part of my identity
Mm,
that is new, and full of hope and full of grace
yes.
and forgiveness. And so, yes, there was something stolen from me, but yes, that there's also been something that's been deposited in me as well.
And
And
you're giving it as a gift to others as well, which is the true sign of grace and beauty and love.
that's what I'm trying to do. Yes, absolutely.
Hmm. Wow. How many articles have you written?
I have written. I did the one for O Magazine. I do some guest blog posts. Other than that, I have not been published anywhere other than my book. So,
Hmm.
but I have written. I do a lot of public speaking, and I go around to different churches,
Hmm.
and I share my story with them. And I also have become a chaplain since that time.
Hmm.
And out of that, I'm able to minister to people who are in the same boat, the
Yeah,
same boat that I was, the brokenhearted and the poor in spirit, and
sure.
those who mourn and those who grieve, and to be someone who can give them a ministry of presence
Hmm.
is what I feel like I am called to do, and to be there for them.
And you are being there for them.
Hmm. My the alias is in town. All those alias in town
Well,
people.
now I understand it. Because so many people, like in the purpose void, are stuck out there, and they need to know that they're worthy, and they can, I'm a Christian, and
Mhm.
I think, oh geez, the name's going to escape me right now, but Saint Augustine said it best when he said, preach the
Mhm.
gospel, use words if
Use
necessary.
Yeah,
I think it
yep,
was Saint
use words
Augustine.
if you have to.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
it
so.
was
It was either that or a sissy. I'm not sure which one, but
one of
yeah, it
them.
was one of those guys.
Yeah.
One of those
So
wise men.
yeah, but I see people out there, and so many people in the West have come, and I think you ever heard of the term meme or memetics, memes?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it
Other
was
than a meme that gets sent to your computer that's this that so other than that, no, I don't
so
know what
there's
memetics.
genes. Memes are like cultural genes. That's kind of what they
Oh,
are.
okay.
Like they're
Okay.
passed on, right? And in a way,
I
it's
understand.
like people in the West have in Western countries are, yes, they're Christians, in like culturally Christians, but there's
Mhm.
something that in them, that's the outlet of their spirituality. And so as a people, as a culture, and it goes back thousands of years, and so many people have abandoned that at their peril and have replaced it with nothing.
Yes. That's where that void of purpose, I believe, comes from.
Yeah.
It is if you have that void in you, you either replace it with nothing or you replace it with the wrong things. You try to fill it up with other things that are not going to help. They're just going to bring you peril, as you said. And without God's grace, I can't remember who it was that said it, but they talked about a God-sized hole
Hmm.
in your soul,
Sure.
and only God fits into that hole. And when you try to fill it up with other things, it doesn't fit right, and it doesn't give you that sense of purpose and that sense of personal power and belonging that you need in order to survive in this world.
And so many people, like, it's interesting because you'll talk to somebody that's a deep Christian, and you'll say that, oh, I meditate. No, I don't meditate. That's Eastern. It's like, okay, change the word.
Mhm.
I spend time with the Lord. How's that? Does that work?
Yeah,
Does that work with you? Or, you say
that's
to
funny.
someone who's an atheist and you say, well, maybe you should try some prayer. Oh, I don't pray. Who am I going to pray to? It's like, oh, okay. Why don't we cultivate some gratefulness then?
Yeah,
Because,
right, right,
like prayer is
right.
just gratefulness, right? And meditation is just
Mhm,
listening to God, or whatever the words are you want to use. But so many
mhm.
people are missing the whole spiritual side of their life altogether. Like, it's not even,
Yes.
never mind Christianity or Buddhism or what. They're not doing anything for their spiritual life, and they wonder
Mhm.
why they feel empty.
Right, right. The void just gets bigger and bigger
Yeah.
and darker and blacker, and and the emptiness needs to be filled with something.
Hmm.
And there are so many different things that people use. In my dealing with individuals, I've seen so many things, not only addictions, but um, workaholism
Hmm.
and materialism. Um, Being narcissistic, trying to be the best at whatever, keep up with the Joneses. It's such an old
Sure.
phrase, but it is still
I
something
know exactly what
that
you mean.
drives human behavior. Yeah.
Sure.
So filling up that void with other things that, I guess I would say they're idols.
That's a
They
good way to
really
put
are
it.
idols. Hmm.
The Tao Te Ching, which is a famous Chinese poem. I think the opening line or the second line is, the name that can be named is not the eternal name. Like we're
Mm.
like these naked apes and we're grunting these sounds, right? And sometimes we know what we mean and sometimes we don't, like with each other. You,
Right.
it's like, oh, what are you talking
Hmm.
about? Prayer. Oh, I don't like that word. Okay, so prayer, write it down. Or, I don't like this or something like that. But people are sometimes they're missing the whole point when they're stuck in their egos, or they don't want to,
Hmm.
they don't want to, they're in their ego. They're not following their ego you need your ego, but you don't want to be in it, and I just,
Hmm.
I see a purpose void. I've seen it on this show so many times. And then the reason why I started this show is because I wanted to meet more wonderful people like you, Anita Wilson, and just
Well, thank
discuss
you.
and, see if we can, have a talk and inspire some people, and to, even if you're not a Christian, like I'm not, proselytizing to anybody here, but
Hmm. Right.
engage the spiritual world, acknowledge that you're a creature of the light, that you can't
Right.
exist in darkness. You have to expose yourself to the light. Otherwise, you end
Hmm.
up, like you said, like moldiness. It's such a good description of that depressed
Mm.
place,
Hmm.
the
Yes.
moldy
Yes.
sliminess. You need to put the light in there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
In order
Anita,
to grow, you have to.
yeah. I think you're super courageous, and you got 6 kids and 7 grandkids. That
I
sounds like
do.
a
I do
boatload.
indeed. It is a boatload. We had 3 that we raised, and then when my youngest daughter went to college, we adopted 3 more and said,
Wow.
"Hey, let's we were still young, and we thought we could adopt out of the foster care system, so we adopted a sibling group of 3, and raised them as well. Well, they were the ones who were the teenagers that were home when I went through my cycle of I don't know what you want to call it, the cycle of despair or whatever. But so I feel that is part of the hurt in my own spirit is how I robbed them of the mother they deserved for that year and a half. And at the time that I was going through recovery, the 3 kids were living with my sister. My sister took them in so that I would have space to recover and that they would have space to be in a safe place where they felt safe. Now, only 2 of those children returned home. One of them never did. Now she and I are close now. We're very close. But at that time, yes, thanks be to God. But at that time, there was enough brokenness just from that year and a half of my sliding down into this pit. Just in that year and a half, I created enough brokenness in her that she did not want to come home again, and until she was an adult. And I don't even remember where we were going with this, but
well, I
guess we were talking about my children and my grandchildren.
Yes,
so that's where,
yes. But you know what? What's interesting that I just spoke to a lady the other day who had a similar story. And she also repaired a relationship that was very damaged. And that's a wonderful story. It's a story of forgiveness. That's the prodigal son.
Yes, it is.
That's what I mean. We all have the opportunity. All of us, to be, sometimes we're the prodigal son. Sometimes we can be the benevolent father, or we can be the envious brother. And that's what the message of that story is I think the envious brother is really the prodigal. It's not the son.
I think you're right.
It's that envious brother. Like, listen to his words. Like, if you say them, like you always read it, you wouldn't even give me a goat that I might celebrate with my friends.
Right. And he wasn't happy his brother came home at all.
Yeah. He was envious of.
It's all about me.
Yeah. So we all have the opportunity to be all 3 parts of that story. And, we have to, if we're to be compassionate with ourselves and with others, then we want to be the benevolent father. That's who we want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a good note to close, Anita Wilson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Where can people find your book?
It's on Amazon. I have my book right here. I'll show you a picture of it. Well, not a picture. I'll show you the actual book. Wow. Alias in Town. That's how you spell it. So, Alias in Town, if you try to go to find Well with Anita Wilson as the author, you won't find it on Amazon. You have to put in Well by Alias in Town in order to find it on Amazon. And my website is aliasintown.com. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, there's my email addresses on there, which is Anita Marie Wilson at Alias in Town. And there's a phone number on there that if you want, you can send me a text message. And I would love to hear from anybody. If you've been through something similar to me, if you have your own story of redemption that you would like to share, if you need to know where some resources are, I'm certified in suicide prevention. So if you need to know where some resources are, or are feeling like you need to reach out to somebody, then feel free to reach out to me. Go to aliasintown.com. And I'm more than willing to be there and help people if I can.
That's wonderful. And if you're listening to this right now and you're on the website, there is links to all those things right on our website. So you just scroll over to the right and you'll see the links to Anita's book on Amazon. You'll see the link to her website. And on that will be the text message number that you can text her at. Anita Wilson, thank you for being a guest. It was absolutely lovely. God bless.
Oh, right. God bless you too. Bye-bye.